Yankees GM Brian Cashman spoke to the media on Wednesday about the club's decision to DFA DJ LeMahieu, and he gave a rough outline on what his plans are going to be going into the trade deadline. So let's get into all things news coming out of the Bronx with our Yankees beat writer for the Post, Greg Joyce. Greg, thanks for hopping on with this. I guess we can start by talking about DJ LeMahieu getting DFA'd. You had tweeted that Brian Cashman said that LeMahieu had communicated as far as back as this winter that playing third base would be an issue for him physically. So why didn't they sign or even trade for someone who naturally plays the position in the offseason?
Yeah, they tried. They were looking for a third baseman have been as far back as this offseason. But Cashman, when asked about that yesterday, basically said it came down to the price was too much. Either some of the options they've had, whether it was a free agent acquisition, said the money isn't endless, or if it was a trade acquisition, he said it was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and whatever they would have had to give up in those talks wasn't something they were willing to do. So obviously the Yankees have the third highest payroll in baseball as is. And Cashman talked about how the Steinbrenners, have given them a lot of leeway there to spend as they want. But obviously, he said, the money, there isn't endless money to do everything to address every need. I think the other part of it is that going into the season, they did have Oswaldo Cabrera healthy and playing, and you knew that if all else, you could have him kind of have that job at third base. And obviously that came to a head in May when he broke his ankle in that gruesome play in Seattle. So that took away a key player for them, somebody who was super valuable as a utility guy moving around. But he got a lot of those starts at third base early on when LeMahieu was on the injured list. Cash also said that they kind of still held out some hope that maybe they could get LeMahieu to a point physically where he was able to play over third base. Obviously, it never really came to that. He played third base in the first spring training game and strained his calf that game. And then obviously only played second base since he came back. They said, Cashman and Boone both said yesterday that when informed of the decision this week to move him to the bench and off second base, that LeMahieu was willing to try to, work out at third base and see if it could become an option. But, the situation just seemed like it was inevitable that it was going to end in a DFA at some point. And just in terms of having the best roster and most roster flexibility with how they could kind of align themselves defensively, the Yankees just decided that yesterday was the best day to finally kind of bite the bullet on that and move on without DJ.
All right, so to have that best roster that they're talking about, it looks like they're going to go and be active at the deadline. And when you guys, the media, were talking to Cashman yesterday, when he spoke about the deadline, he said he'd love to import a starter, some relievers, and an infielder as well, if possible. We need to break down this if possible because I'm going to ask you, do the Yankees have enough assets for Cashman to address every need at the deadline? Are they going to have to, I guess, empty their farm system?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough ask because that list is kind of growing longer by the day. Obviously, with Clark Schmidt's injury, season ender last week, with him likely headed for Tommy John surgery, that added to the need for a starter, which they may have done all, even without that. But now is, especially that, they're going to be without Schmidt and Cole for all the season. Luis Heel probably not coming back until late July, early August at this point. So, like you said, he's looking for a starter at this point with how the bullpen's been taxed and overworked and some of the injuries they had. Like you could see them try to acquire two relievers maybe, and then that infielder who can play third base. So it is a long list. The Yankee system has they've done a decent job over the years of producing enough players to kind of go in those big trades that the Yankees make usually at the deadline and not actually come back to haunt the Yankees in most cases, at least over the last couple of years. We'll see what they're willing to do this year. Obviously, their top prospect, George Lombard Jr., I would think would be close to untouchable. Cashman didn't want to say yesterday which guys were and weren't off limits, but I would think that in most cases he'd be off the table. But we'll see. Is a guy like Spencer Jones available? So they have a lot of intriguing arms at the lower levels, at high A, or some of those guys that, were just drafted in the last couple of years, if some of those guys could be on the move. We'll see. The real issue is that there just may not be a ton of players to be had just because so many teams are still kind of in it on the fringe, trying to figure out if they can be, hang around and catch a wild card spot. So there's not going to be a ton of defined, like clear cut defined sellers. Uh, and just among third basemen too, like there's not a ton of assets there, available. So, and like same goes for starting pitching. It kind of seems like it's going to be somewhat of a weak deadline in terms of like who's available. So Cashman kind of alluded to that yesterday of he said we're going to try to go to town and fill all these needs, but there's no guarantee that it happens because you don't know what's available. And even, when there are guys available, there's going to be a lot of teams going for the same guy, and whether the Yankees can line up with teams on all those guys, given the amount of needs that they have, it's going to be a tough ask. So we'll see what they end up with, but there's going to be a lot of competition for the top guys, and I would expect the Yankees to be in on those conversations. But yeah, we'll see. That it's going to be a tough kind of needle to thread there.
All right, well, we got exactly 3 weeks to the trade deadline, so I'm sure we'll be talking to you again very soon. Greg, Joyce, thanks for joining us.